Welcome back to the What I Do Believe podcast, where we talk post-deconstruction faith from the lens of no longer criticizing what we don't believe anymore or the people that do, and we are instead going to focus on moving forward, focusing on what we do believe. So this is a space for hope. This is a space for moving forward and finding a faith that actually works instead of just constantly rehashing the one or the ones that we know don't work anymore. My name is Zach. Thanks for being here, and really appreciate all the support the podcast has gotten over the last couple of weeks. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this, and it means a lot. So in my last Substack post, I wrote about accepting loneliness, which is, that sense of being spiritually homeless after deconstruction. And for me, and I know it's true for a lot of other people too, that's meant realizing that I really don't quite fit into the church as it usually exists, at least in my context, the modern American church. So I don't fit in that, but I'm still finding God in contemplative practices, in contemplative communities, in silence, small groups, prayer, meditation, things like that. And today I want to talk about kind of that dynamic of, how I'm very much still experiencing God pretty powerfully in silence and solitude, in groups of people focused on that. But I haven't felt the need to regularly attend a larger church community or an institutional church in a long time. It's been several years since I have walked inside of a church building, to attend a worship service or attend any type of thing like that, other than, just visiting family or, little moments like that where you go just because of the people that you're with. But on the whole, have not walked into a church willingly in the past couple of years. And I kind of want to talk about why that is and why I'm okay with that, and maybe give some insights for other people who might be in a similar situation. Now, when I say I haven't been part of an institutional church for years, a lot of times, I'll be met with some reasons that people bring up, or shoulds, right? Reasons for why I should be a part of a church, even though I'm feeling the things I'm feeling or experiencing the things I'm experiencing. So there are definitely some usual shoulds. The first one is you should be a part of a church because you need community. And you're right, I do. But I already have it. My closest friendships, spiritual direction, small house church community I've been a part of give me more real community than a Sunday crowd ever has. Some people say you need teaching. And yeah, sure, I actually agree with that. I love learning, but I've gotten way more depth from books and conversations and podcasts and personal study than probably I've ever gotten from a, sermon in a conventional church setting, at least one that I've ever been to. Some people say you need accountability. And I have that too. It comes from people who actually know me and walk with me. Not, strangers sitting in a pew. And some people will say, you need the sacraments. And again, I say, you know what? Yes, you're right, I do. Actually, in our house church community, we share the Eucharist every single week. And it's been more meaningful than almost anything I've experienced in an institutional setting, whether that's, passing the plate or walking up to the stage. I'm not dogging those things. I'm just saying I haven't gone without the sacraments. So those are the usual shoulds. And obviously I've just given my responses to those. They don't carry too much weight for me anymore. But then there's the big one that I haven't touched on yet. And this is the one that gets thrown at me more often than not in all kinds of different contexts. But it's the one that focuses on faithfulness. You need to be faithful. Faithful to Christ's body, faithful to the church. It's about loyalty. It's about, getting over your frustrations and just choosing to be loyal despite all of that, and then sometimes people throw out there, if all the good people leave the church, then no one's going to be left to reform it. No one's going to be left to improve it. No one's going to be left to help it move and grow and so on and so forth. And I get where this idea comes from. I get the idea of loyalty and commitment and the sense that, staying, even when it's hard, is what faithfulness really looks like. A lot of times people throw in like the marriage metaphor, stay married even when it's hard, or, stay in relationship with friends and family. And, you have to stay committed to those things, because if you just follow how you feel about it all the time, then, you're probably going to break off those relationships when, a little bit of commitment would have enabled you to push past the challenges and, find benefit on both sides. And I understand that. I do get it. And, to be fair, there are people who are doing that. There are churches trying to move in a new direction. Some are leaning more contemplative, are slowing down. They're making space for prayer and moving away from performance-driven faith. And I don't want to ignore that. I don't want to ignore that there are churches, good churches, who are trying to move in that direction, and that there are good people who are a part of that and working towards that and exercising a lot of patience and commitment to that. And so that's good. That kind of reform, or that kind of work, I often think of the metaphor of, steering like a massive ship. Maybe it's like a cruise liner or an aircraft carrier or something like that. And those ships are so big that they can't just make, really quick right or left turns or U-turns. When something that huge needs to change course, it takes miles and miles and miles. And it's a slow, gradual turn, moving in a different direction. And maybe the comparison point for the church is that, when a church is a big institution or a big thing like that, if it's going to change course, it's going to take miles and miles. It's going to take years and years. It's going to take decades. And maybe that's what's happening, probably is what's happening. Some large churches, or the institutional church, are turning. And that's good. I'm not going to say that's not happening. But here's the thing. I discerned a long time ago, and still feel pretty confidently, that that's not for me to do. I do not feel called to sit on the poop deck waiting for the big ship to swing around. I don't have the patience to spend my life hoping that the ship eventually completes its turn and moves in a new direction. Because honestly, the way I see it, that might not be true too. Sometimes it doesn't feel like the ship is turning at all. Sometimes I think we need to look at the situation of the modern church, the institutional church, particularly in America, and just admit that we've already hit the iceberg. Just admit that the damage is done and that the ship is going down. I think it's very possible that that's true too. In fact, that's kind of the way I see it. I'm not willing to make definitive statements or claims or predictions about what I know is true with regard to that, but really does seem to me like the iceberg has already been hit, the damage is done, the ship is going down. And for me, and maybe for others too, I don't know, but the faithful response here isn't denial. It's not pretending everything can be patched up if we just rearrange the deck chairs or keep the engines running. It's the honesty and courage to name what's true, which is, to stop trying to course correct and just admit that we're sinking. And that leads me to another image, another metaphor that's not a ship metaphor, but go with me here. Metaphor of life support. So much of my experience with the church, especially the last couple of years, has just felt like, keeping the life support going. Feels like plugging into the machines and tracking the numbers and maintaining the programs and just keeping it alive, keeping it twitching just enough to be able to say it's still alive. But that's not not life. That's not resurrection. That's not renewal. That's, artificial survival. And I can't help but wonder if we've kept the institution on life support for too long. And I actually think it's possible that maybe the institution needs to maybe we just need to let it die. Maybe we can let it die. Because, the gospel has never been about keeping things alive at all costs. It's never been about avoiding death, dodging suffering. It's never been about, maintaining power and control. That's not resurrection. That's fear. And despite the statistics of how things are kind of going downhill for the American church, it seems to me like people just can't let go of it because they're afraid. People in these churches are afraid of losing their influence. They're afraid of losing political power that's tied to the church. They're afraid of what happens when the institution crumbles. And they've come to believe that, God only works through these big movements and through structures and through control and through institutions. But the reality is, that's antithetical to the gospel. I mean, the whole story of Jesus points us towards death and resurrection. We can't get new life without passing through death first. We can't experience resurrection if we refuse to let things die. And that's why, if the church is dying, I don't think we have to try to scramble to save it and keep it on life support and keep all that going. I think that what's always been good and true and beautiful about the church, for the past 2,000 years, the prayers, the sacraments, the contemplative practices, the spirit alive amongst God's people, I don't think these things are going to disappear. I think that these things will resurrect into new life if the church dies, the institution dies. It'll resurrect to a new life, new freedom, without the machinery and the heavy weight of the institution that's kept them down. But we can't experience that new life, that resurrection, until we stop keeping the institution alive on these machines, And maybe that's perhaps one of the biggest reasons that I don't feel the need to be a part of the institutional church right now. I'm ready to accept the possibility that it's dying, and I'm ready to just accept that and get on with the resurrection. And from my perspective, that's what's happening. I don't feel the need to delay it or postpone it, and I don't want to spend time and energy resisting the inevitable. I want to live into the resurrection that's already breaking in. So, if you're still in a church, I don't say all of this to judge you. If you feel like it's right for you to stay and be a part of it, you want to stay, you want to be a part of it, that's great. I trust you. I'm not saying you need to leave. I'm not trying to convince you of that at all, actually. Your presence and involvement there might be planting seeds for something that I don't see or I'll never see, and that's great. Again, I'm not trying to convince anybody to do anything differently. I'm just sharing my experience. So, if you're still there, I'm glad for you, assuming that you are there because you want to be there and you feel called to be there. And maybe you can understand a little bit why I'm not there, or why other people are not there. And if you're like me and you have stepped away, you're not alone. You don't have to feel guilty. God is not locked in a building or in a denomination. Wherever you are, faithfulness does not only look like clinging to these institutions. I think it looks like showing up where God's presence is alive and in whatever form it takes. And, that's the kind of church that I want to be faithful to. So, time for the shameless plugs at the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening to the What I Do Believe podcast. It really means a lot to me. that you have given me your time and attention, the most valuable things that you have. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you like the show, feel free to share this episode with somebody else. Please do consider leaving a 5-star review in your podcast player. It definitely helps people find the show and see that it's something worth listening to. Check out the companion newsletter over on Substack. It's called the same thing, What I Do Believe. And all the stuff I'm putting out is available over at whatidobelieve.com. You can find this podcast. You can find the newsletter. You can find a link to my book, Deconstruct with Jesus. Definitely would appreciate it if you gave that a read. And again, thank you so much for being a part of this. Please do feel free to share your thoughts and opinions. You can reach out to me via that website, whatidobelieve.com. Definitely interested to hear how people are engaging with what I'm sharing, and would love to know what the feedback is, assuming that it's kind and respectful. Thanks for listening. Take care. See you next time. Peace. Goodbye.